An asteroid delivers an alien species called the Mimics that seems intent on taking over the planet. Military from all over the world call up arms to fight their new enemy, but only obtain victory after 5 years of warfare. Major William Cage promises that their newly developed mech suits will pave the way to stopping the alien invasion. Rita Vratarsky becomes the new face of hope after killing hundreds of Mimics during her first day of combat in Verdun. The army has held off the Mimics from crossing the English Channel and is now preparing for Operation Downfall, where they intend to rid the aliens for good. Before Operation Downfall begins, Cage arrives at the United Defense Force headquarters in London and meets with General Brigham. Brigham mournfully expects many casualties during the battle and that the public will want someone like him to blame for it. Cage suggests creating a story to earn Brigham the public's favor, but Brigham clarifies that he doesn't want Cage to create a marketing campaign for him. Instead, he needs Cage to market the operation. Brigham intends to send Cage on the field in France to record the first wave of the operation, guaranteeing his safety since they detect minimal mimic activity there. Cage stresses that he does ad campaigns for the army specifically to avoid the front lines. Brigham clarifies that his mission is an order, and Cage's commanding officer has already approved it. Cage is stunned and tries to bargain by implying that he can create a campaign to blame Brigham for the soldiers' deaths. Thinking that his blackmail worked, Cage walks out the door and is surprised when Brigham orders his men to arrest him. Cage tries to escape but gets tasered and knocked out. Cage wakes up in the military base in Heathrow and is mistaken as a fresh recruit. He meets Master Sergeant Rarrell and demands a phone call to his commanding officer. However, Rarrell reveals that Cage has been demoted to private and reports claim that he'll do anything to get out of combat duty. Rarrell takes him to his bunk and introduces him to the J Squad, composed of Kimmel, Griff, Nance, Ford, Skinner, and Kuntz. Rarrell declares that Cage will be joining them and assigns the squad to make him combat ready by tomorrow. The next day, the J Squad suits up in their mech suits to begin Operation Downfall. On the way to the beach, Skinner mocks Cage, calling him a dead guy. The rest of the squad taunts him that no one will be watching his back. Cage asks Kimmel how to turn the safety off on his suit, but before he can answer, the floor opens up. Before Rarrell can drop them, something hits the plane, forcing everyone to eject. Cage freezes as he sees a few men dying during the drop, leaving him the last man to eject from the plane. Cage gets thrown in numerous directions before landing on the beach. While trying to make sense of things, Cage witnesses Kimmel getting crushed by another plane. Cage staggers his way to the battle, watching soldiers die along his way. A plane spirals out of control towards them, so Cage hurriedly drops into a pit to avoid it. Cage's helmet emits feedback as he hears soldiers requesting help. He takes the helmet off and sees Rita battling a mimic. Rita gets thrown off by the alien, but she blows it up with her firearm. Rita finds Cage just before a projectile hits her. Panicked, Cage heads back to the sea, but Rarrell stops him, redirecting him into battle. He reunites with J Squad in a trench where Griff wonders how the mimics knew they were arriving. As Rarrell barks commands, Cage weakly asks how to turn the safety off, but everyone ignores him. Nance detects mimics coming in fast, so they get into position. Cage struggles with the controls in his mech suit when he sees a mimic coming out from the ground behind the squad. The mimic slaughters the squad one by one while Cage backs away. He finally turns the safety off and shoots down the mimic. He laughs triumphantly when he kills the creature. However, a larger one comes out. More mimics gather around him, and his mech suit is out of bullets. Cage spots a bomb beside him and grabs it just before the mimic lunges. The bomb explodes between him and the mimic, causing the mimic's blood to spill on him while Cage disintegrates. Cage wakes up screaming, back in the Heathrow base. He's greeted the same way as the day before. Confused, he asks Rarrell what day it is, and Rarrell answers that it's Judgment Day while showing the report that marked him as a deserter. Cage tries to tell Rarrell that he already lived this day, but he realizes that Rarrell still believes that he'll say anything to get out of combat. During the flight to the beach, the squad ridicules him the same way. The plane is hit again before they're deployed, and Cage ejects himself. He tries to warn Kimmel about the plane, but he's too late. Cage then evades the next plane that crashes and sees Rita in battle. He saves her from the projectile, but his armor gets hit instead. Rita takes his suit's battery to replace her own and leaves him to die at the hands of another mimic. 𝐾𝐲 wakes up in Heathrow again and immediately confronts 𝐜𝐢𝐳. 𝐾𝐲 tells him who he is and points out the report that 𝐜𝐢𝐳 has before he even presents it, hoping to convince 𝐜𝐢𝐳 that he's lived through the day already. Still, 𝐜𝐢𝐳 isn't convinced and drags him to meet the J Squad. 𝐾𝐲 then displays his knowledge about the squad, including the squad's hidden playing cards. Despite this, 𝐾𝐲 is forced into a mech suit and the plane the next day, with duct tape over his mouth. He tries to warn them about the plane getting hit, but the tape muffles him. He finally removes the tape just before the plane explodes, then ejects himself out as soon as it does. 𝐾𝐲 pushes Kimmel out of the incoming plane's way but gets crushed by it instead. After multiple iterations of the same day, 𝐾𝐲 successfully saves Kimmel and Rita without getting killed. He warns Rita that they'll all get killed while he fires at the mimics that find them without looking at them. Rita gets quietly curious about his knowledge of events and tells 𝐾𝐲 to find her when he wakes up again just before they die in an explosion. On the next loop, 𝐾𝐲 walks ahead of 𝐜𝐢𝐳 and hides the squad's playing cards before 𝐜𝐢𝐳 finds them. He becomes amicable to everyone, so 𝐜𝐢𝐳 leaves without further remarks. During a jog with the squad, 𝐾𝐲 insults 𝐜𝐢𝐳, so the squad is forced to do push-ups. During this, 𝐾𝐲 rolls under the passing jeep but miscalculates and gets run over. He tries it again on the next loop and successfully slips out of 𝐜𝐢𝐳's sight. He finds Rita training in the middle of the shooting range, so he walks up to her. 𝐾𝐲 tells her that she told him to find her when he wakes up, catching her attention. Rita walks with 𝐾𝐲 and warns him not to tell anyone else what he's experiencing, lest he gets thrown in the psych ward or dissected. She figures that he killed a mimic and got covered in its blood before the first reset. Rita reveals that she experienced the same thing, but she lost the ability already. Rita takes him to the mech suit warehouse to meet Dr. Carter. Rita tells Carter that 𝐾𝐲 has the same ability she had before. Carter is an expert in mimic biology and knows about the time looping skill. They explain that the mimics are fighting as a single entity. The drones are the usual fighters, but there are the alphas like the one 𝐾𝐲 killed. The alphas send the commands to the drones from the Omega, which controls the entire species. The Omega can control time and restart the day whenever an alpha is killed. The Omega retains its memory. That's why they haven't won over the mimics except in Verdun. Rita explains that they won at Verdun only because the Omega wanted them to believe that they could win and throw everything into Operation Downfall. When 𝐾𝐲 killed the Alpha, he entered the Omega's nervous system. Therefore, he can reset the day by dying. 𝐾𝐲 suggests taking the information to the general, but Rita reveals she's done it and failed numerous times. Carter explains that the Omega can sense when it's losing control. Therefore, it's already searching for 𝐾𝐲. When it's close to finding him, 𝐾𝐲 will see visions that will also show him where the Omega is. Rita insists that she knew where the Omega was, but she lost the power before they could get to it. By the time they arrived in Verdun to kill it, the Omega was gone. Rita tells 𝐾𝐲 that he has to take her to the Omega so she can kill it, but 𝐾𝐲 reveals that he's not trained for combat. Hearing this, Rita forces him into training. 𝐾𝐲 struggles to reload his weapon during training and gets knocked out. He gets thrown back by the automated machine and breaks his back. Rita tells him that he must make sure he dies if he ever gets injured. She reveals that she lost the ability after being wounded in battle and getting a blood transfusion, therefore losing the Alpha's blood. Rita then shoots him, so 𝐾𝐲 wakes up in another reset. Over the next resets, Rita continues to train 𝐾𝐲, and every time he gets wounded, she kills him to reset the day. 𝐾𝐲 lives through the same day countless times until finally, he gets his first vision. On the next reset, he tells Rita and Carter that the Omega is in a dam in Germany. While Carter figures out which dam it is, Rita tells 𝐾𝐲 to figure out how they can get out of the battle the next day to hunt it down. 𝐾𝐲 lives through the battle on the beach several times to figure out a safe path for them to escape. After seeing her die multiple times, 𝐾𝐲 starts to doubt if they're doing things right. On the morning of the battle, 𝐾𝐲 escapes into the city and drinks in a pub. The other patrons theorize on what the mimics want, but 𝐾𝐲 tells them that it's pointless since the mimics will win no matter what. Suddenly, the power flickers. 𝐾𝐲 heads out and sees the mimics speeding into town. 𝐾𝐲 gets killed and resets the day again. 𝐾𝐲 easily wins the combat training and confirms that Carter has found the dam where the Omega is, but he has lost hope. The next day, 𝐾𝐲 and Rita easily defeat several mimics and save the J Squad. They make it out of the beach and split up to find a car. Rita successfully starts the van she finds, so she picks up 𝐾𝐲 and drives away. Suddenly, a mimic attacks them, so 𝐾𝐲 shoots it down. Once they reach a quiet road, 𝐾𝐲 tells Rita that she opened up to him once, but Rita denies the details he claims, thinking that she made him up to keep him quiet. He brings up Hendrix, but Rita tells him that she doesn't want to talk about him because she watched him die hundreds of times. Once they're out of fuel and their mech suits are out of battery, they leave the car and suits behind and head into a house. Rita finds a helicopter and insists on taking it to the dam, though they don't have the keys. 𝐾𝐲 notices her flinching and discovers that she got shot in the shoulder. After tending to her wound, 𝐾𝐲 notes that even if they reach the dam, they don't have their suits to fight. He suggests resting in the house and living another day. Rita realizes that they've been in that house before, so 𝐾𝐲 reveals that he already has the helicopter keys. She scolds him for wasting time, but 𝐾𝐲 explains that she always dies when they take the helicopter. Still, she heads out and prepares the vehicle. He reminds her that she'll be permanently dead if he kills the Omega. Rita insists that it doesn't matter, so 𝐾𝐲 hints that he doesn't want to see her die. Rita starts the helicopter, and a mimic attacks her. 𝐾𝐲 tries to save her, but the helicopter crashes anyway. 𝐾𝐲 kills the mimic and finds Rita dying. He holds her in his arms just before another mimic kills 𝐾𝐲. 𝐾𝐲 lives another reset and approaches Rita, but he simply walks away this time. On the morning of the battle, 𝐤𝐲 tells Griff to get him more ammunition and an extra battery. On the battlefield, he allows Kimmel to die and eventually reaches the house and helicopter alone. He kills the mimics before starting the helicopter. However, when he reaches the dam, he finds it empty. A drone attacks him but restrains from killing him, knowing that his death will reset the day. Suddenly, an Alpha appears and stops 𝐤𝐲 from shooting himself. The Alpha's attack has him bleeding from the arm, so 𝐤𝐲 squeezes himself under the pipes and drowns himself to reset the day. 𝐤𝐲 tells Carter and Rita that the dam is a trap and that the Alpha attempted to bleed him out to make him lose the power. Rita suggests using a device Carter invented to link him to the Omega, but Carter only has the prototype. Rita and 𝐤𝐲 infiltrate the Ministry of Defense to get Carter's finished device that got confiscated. After doing it numerous times, 𝐤𝐲 coordinates Rita to avoid detection until they reach Brigham. While holding him at gunpoint, 𝐤𝐲 reveals his ability to reset the time. To convince him, 𝐤𝐲 predicts Brigham's phone call and the files his secretary is about to give him. 𝐤𝐲 tells Brigham that no matter how many times they've had this conversation, he doesn't listen, and they will end up losing the battle the next day. He points to Brigham's safe, saying that what's inside will save them. Brigham humors him and takes out Carter's device from the safe. After doubting 𝐤𝐲's claims, Brigham hands him the device. 𝐤𝐲 admits to Rita that he never got that far, so he doesn't know what happens next. They leave the ministry but get cornered by soldiers, prompting Rita to shoot 𝐤𝐲. In the next reset, they take a car to leave the building. While driving away, Rita orders him to stab the device on his leg. When he does, 𝐤𝐲 finally sees that the Omega is under the Louvre in Paris. They drive out of the building but get stopped by a soldier in a mech suit. The crash knocks them out. 𝐤𝐲 wakes up and finds out that he got a blood transfusion. 𝐤𝐲 desperately tries to free himself from his bindings but ends up toppling his bed. Rita finds him and moves to kill him, but he tells her that he has lost the power already. The two escape and plot out how to kill the Omega before the invasion. 𝐤𝐲 meets up with J Squad and convinces them that he knows everything about them. He reveals that they'll all die tomorrow, but he gives them a chance to win by killing the Omega. Still, Griff is skeptical since he doesn't know 𝐤𝐲, so 𝐤𝐲 tells them to at least trust Rita. The squad takes a plane to Paris before Operation Downfall begins. When they near the Louvre, mimics attack their plane, so everyone ejects. With his mech suit not hooked to the plane, 𝐤𝐲 ends up crashing with the plane and gets dropped into the water. 𝐤𝐲 reunites with the squad, but they're already low on ammunition and have lost Nance, Kimmel, and Kuntz. Rita urges the squad to continue despite the odds. They use an abandoned plane to reach the louver, while Skinner and Griff fight off the mimics to buy them time. When they run out of ammo, Skinner activates a bomb, killing themselves and some mimics. Ford and Cage shoot the mimics that get near, but Ford is eventually captured. The plane crashes onto the louver, and Cage and Rita rush into the garage. An Alpha blocks their path, so Rita insists on distracting it to allow Cage to kill the Omega. Before leaving, she thanks Cage and kisses him. The Alpha chases after Rita when she runs, allowing Cage to rush to the Omega. Rita hides from the Alpha, but it finds her and kills her. Seeing her die, Cage hesitates before jumping into the water. He swims deep inside to reach the Omega at the bottom, but the Alpha follows him. The Alpha stabs him on the side just as Cage drops the grenade. The Omega explodes, killing all Alphas and drones as well. Cage floats in the water with the Omega's blood enveloping his body. Cage wakes up in the helicopter to London 2 days earlier. He watches Brigham announce that the mimics have perished after a huge wave of energy was detected in Paris. Cage heads to the Heathrow base and finds the entire J Squad is still alive. He then goes to the training hall, where he finds Rita alive, but she doesn't recognize him. Cage laughs, glad to see that everything turned out well.